At holiday lunch, my mother fired me from the family like I was an employee she had finally grown tired of using. She told me to stop relying on the family. So I went home, opened my laptop, and quietly unplugged every single thing they relied on me for. By the time they realized the heat, the house, and the money were not theirs, but mine, we were already sitting across from each other in a public place where nobody could pretend anymore. My name is Alice Ross. I am 39 years old, and in my professional life, I am a senior operations manager for a mid-sized logistics firm. My job is entirely about flow. I ensure that goods move from point A to point B without friction, that supply chains remain unbroken, and that potential disasters are mitigated before the client ever knows they were a possibility. I am good at my job because I understand how to keep systems running, even when the infrastructure is crumbling. I suppose that is why I was so good at being a daughter to my parents. I had treated their chaotic lives like a delicate supply chain for nearly 2 decades, patching the holes and greasing the wheels, all while remaining invisible in the background. It was holiday lunch at my parents' house in Maple Ridge. The suburb was the kind of place that looked perfect on a postcard, but felt suffocating the moment you crossed the town line. The dining room was bathed in that heavy, artificial yellow light my mother favored, casting a jaundiced glow over the table. The air smelled of roasted chicken, sage, and the distinct, stale scent of old carpet that never quite left the house no matter how many scented candles Linda burned. We were halfway through the meal. The conversation had been the usual tightrope walk of passive-aggressive comments and forced laughter. My father, Gordon, was telling a story he had told 100 times before, something about the neighbor's lawn maintenance. My older brother, Marcus, was checking his watch, clearly eager to get back to whatever fictional important business he claimed to have. My younger brother, Eli, was nursing his 3rd glass of wine, his eyes glassy and bored, and then the air in the room changed. It was not gradual, it was instant, like a sudden drop in cabin pressure. My mother, Linda, set her fork down with a sharp clink against the china. She did not look at my father. She did not look at my brothers. She looked directly at me. Her gaze was flat, stripped of the performative warmth she usually wore when guests were around. "You should pack your things and leave," she said. Her voice was steady, conversational even, as if she were commenting on the weather. "It is time you stopped relying on the family, Alice." The silence that followed was absolute. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. The words floated in the space between the gravy boat and the centerpiece of plastic holly. "Stop relying on the family." I looked around the table, waiting for the punchline. I waited for someone to laugh, or for my father to chime in and say she was joking, or for Marcus to ask what on earth she was talking about. Instead, the room froze in a tableau of cowardice. My father, Gordon, suddenly found the mound of mashed potatoes on his plate to be the most fascinating thing in the universe. He stared at it intently, his fork hovering, refusing to lift his eyes. This was the man who liked to project the image of the patriarch, the protector. In that moment, he shrank into his chair, a small man afraid of his wife's sudden sharp edges. Marcus, my big brother, the one who always bragged about having his life together, immediately pulled his phone out of his pocket. He started scrolling, his thumb moving rhythmically, pretending that an urgent email demanded his attention right at this second. He did not look at me. He did not ask why our mother was kicking me out in the middle of a holiday meal. And then there was Eli, my baby brother. He did not look away. He looked right at me, and the corner of his mouth twitched upward into a smirk. It was a look of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. He had been waiting for this. He enjoyed this. I sat there, my hands resting on the tablecloth. I could feel the texture of the fabric under my fingertips. I took a breath, letting the oxygen fill my lungs, expecting the familiar sting of tears or the rising heat of humiliation. I expected to feel small. That was how this family usually made me feel: small, needy, and eternally in debt to their benevolence. But the tears did not come. The humiliation did not land. Instead, something cold and sharp clicked into place in my brain. It felt like the moment I opened a complex spreadsheet and saw the error immediately. It was clarity. Stop relying on the family. The phrase echoed in my mind, bouncing off the walls of my skull. It was so absurd, so diametrically opposed to reality, that it short-circuited my emotional response and went straight to my analytical side. I looked at Linda, who was now calmly cutting a piece of chicken as if she had not just severed her relationship with her only daughter. She truly believed it. I could see it in the set of her jaw. She had constructed a narrative in her head where I was the leech, the burden, the one dragging them down. Inside my mind, the list began to scroll. It was a ledger I had kept secret for years, protecting their pride, protecting their fragile egos. Item 1, the credit card debt. 3 years ago, Gordon and Linda had maxed out 4 cards. They were drowning in interest payments, terrified of losing their credit rating. They had called me, whispering, begging. I had transferred $12,000 from my savings account to clear the balance. I told them to call it a gift. They never mentioned it again. To the world, they were financially prudent retirees. To me, they were dependents. Item 2. Marcus's mortgage. 18 months ago. Marcus had lost his job because he could not stop arguing with his supervisor. He was 3 months behind on his mortgage payments. The bank was threatening foreclosure. He had called me at 2 in the morning, sobbing, talking about how he could not let his wife find out. I paid the 3 months of back payments plus the next 2 months ahead, $10,500. He promised to pay me back when he got on his feet. He never did, but at family gatherings, he was still the successful entrepreneur, and I was just the single sister with the boring office job. Item 3, Eli. My dear brother Eli, last year, he got into a bar fight, drunk and disorderly, assault charges pending. He needed a lawyer, a good one, or he was going to spend time in county jail. Mom called me in a panic, saying they did not have the liquidity. I paid the retainer, $5,000. I paid the fines, another $2,000. Eli walked free. And today, he sat across from me, smirking, secure in the knowledge that he was the golden boy who could do no wrong. I looked at the food on my plate. The carrots were slightly overcooked. The roll was store-bought. If they truly believed I was relying on them, then that meant they had absolutely no idea who was actually keeping the lights on. They were living in a fantasy world where bills paid themselves and legal problems vanished by magic. They thought the safety net they walked on was woven from their own hard work. They did not know I was the one holding the net. The realization was not painful. It was liberating. It was like finding the off switch on a machine that had been screaming in my ear for 20 years. Stop relying on the family. Okay. If that was the story they wanted to tell, I would let them live in it. But stories require suspension of disbelief, and their story required my money to remain believable. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I did not pull out my phone and show them the bank transfers. That is what the old Alice would have done, begged for validation, tried to prove her worth, tried to show them that she was good, the new Alice, the one born in the silence of that dining room, realized that proving them wrong with words was a waste of energy. Logistics is not about talking about moving boxes. It is about moving them. I picked up my fork. I stabbed a piece of the store-bought roll. I brought it to my mouth and chewed slowly. It was dry. The silence stretched on. It grew heavy and awkward, but not for me. I watched them squirm. Gordon finally took a bite of his potatoes, chewing rapidly, his eyes darting around the room. Marcus cleared his throat and took a sip of water, the ice cubes clinking loudly against the glass. Eli stopped smirking and started to look confused, perhaps wondering why I was not crying yet. I swallowed the bread. I took a sip of my wine. I placed the glass back down on the coaster with precision, lining up the bottom of the stem with the center of the cork circle. I was not a daughter anymore. I was a collection agency. I was the bank, and the bank was closing its doors. I looked at the house around me. The heating was running full blast because my mother liked it tropical in the winter. The gas bill for this place was usually around $400 a month in December. I knew this because the auto pay was linked to my primary checking account. I looked at the smart TV in the living room. glowing with a screensaver of family photos, mostly of Marcus and Eli. The high-speed internet subscription that powered it cost $89 a month. That was on my credit card. I looked at the car keys sitting on the counter by the door. Eli's car insurance, $150 a month. My account. They wanted me to leave. They wanted me to cut ties. They wanted me to stop relying on them. The irony was so rich, I could taste it better than the wine. By kicking me out, they were effectively firing their biggest investor. They were evicting their landlord. They were suing their own insurance company. I finished my glass of wine. I dabbed my mouth with the paper napkin. "Alice," my father whispered, his voice trembling slightly. He sounded terrified, as if he knew something was wrong but could not quite place it. Maybe your mother is just stressed. The holidays are hard." He was giving me an out. He was offering me a chance to apologize, to grovel, to smooth things over so we could go back to the status quo where I paid for everything and they treated me like dirt. I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes. He was a weak man. He had always been a weak man. "No, Gordon," I said. I did not call him Dad. "She is right." I turned my head and locked eyes with my mother. She was still holding her knife and fork, her posture rigid, waiting for me to break. She wanted a fight. She wanted me to scream so she could call me hysterical. She wanted me to cry so she could call me weak. I gave her neither. I stared right into her pupils. I let the silence hang for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I let her see the calm in my face. I let her see that the daughter who used to desperate for her approval had just left the building, replaced by a stranger who knew exactly what everything cost. "Fine," I thought. "I will stop relying on you. I will stop relying on you to acknowledge me. I will stop relying on you to love me. And most importantly, I will stop letting you rely on me." "You are absolutely right, Mother," I said, my voice smooth and cool. "I have been leaning on you all for far too long. It is time I stood on my own 2 feet. I saw a flicker of confusion in her eyes. It was not the reaction she expected. She blinked, unsettled. "Well," she said, her voice faltering just a fraction. "Good. I am glad you agree." "I do," I said. "Completely." I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor, a harsh sound that made Marcus flinch. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my dress. I looked down at them one last time, 4 people sitting around a table funded by a ghost. "You want me to leave?" I thought. "Watch me." I would leave, and I would take every single dollar, every kilowatt of power, every gigabyte of data, and every ounce of safety I had provided with me. "I will go pack," I said. And for the first time in my life, I truly meant it. To understand why I walked away from that table with such terrifying calm. You have to understand the architecture of the Ross family. From the outside, the house in Maple Ridge always looked like the definition of suburban stability. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. The shutters were painted a tasteful shade of slate blue, and my mother, Linda, made sure we had the best wreath in the neighborhood for every single season. But the foundation of that house was not concrete or timber. It was built entirely on a very specific, unspoken contract the daughter gives, and the sons take. Growing up, there was a phrase my mother loved to use. She would say it whenever I was exhausted from doing chores that Marcus and Eli had skipped, or when I was up late tutoring Eli so he would not fail math. She would cup my chin, look me in the eye with a serious, almost militaristic intensity, and say, "Strong women hold the family together, Alice." For years, I thought it was a compliment. I thought she was inducting me into a secret society of capable, powerful Amazons. It took me 3 decades to realize it was not a compliment. It was a grooming tactic. It was a shackle disguised as a medal. "Strong women hold the family together" was a rule that applied exclusively to me. For Marcus and Eli, the rule was entirely different. It was the age-old, infuriating exoneration. Boys will be boys. If Marcus broke a window, he was just being spirited. If I dropped a plate, I was clumsy and careless. If Eli failed a class, the teacher was too hard on him. If I got a B plus instead of an A, I was not applying myself. I was raised to be the load-bearing wall of a structure I did not design, conditioned to believe that if I buckled, even for a second, the roof collapsing would be my fault. I remember the first time the financial shifting began. I was 22 years old. I had just graduated from university and landed my first real job as a junior logistics coordinator. I was so proud of that salary. It felt enormous at the time, though looking back, it was barely enough to cover rent and ramen noodles. I came home for a weekend visit, feeling like a successful adult. After dinner, Linda and Gordon sat me down at the kitchen table. The air was thick with a performative solemnity. My father stared at his hands, and my mother pushed a stack of papers toward me. They were credit card statements. The numbers were written in red, spiraling interest rates that made my stomach turn. They had been living a lifestyle they could not afford to keep up appearances with the neighbors' new cars, vacations we did not need, clothes with logos that mattered to people who cared about such things. "We just got a little behind," Linda had said, her voice trembling just enough to be effective. "We helped you with college, Alice. We invested in you. Now that you are doing so well, we thought, well, family helps family." I paid it. I drained the small savings account I had started building. I wrote a check for $4,000, feeling a swell of pride that I could be the savior. I did not realize then that I had just signed the first installment of a lifetime subscription to their incompetence. That was the gateway. Once they knew the bank of Alice was open, they never stopped making withdrawals. The pattern became exhausting. The requests never came when things were good. They came in the dark, in panic, designed to bypass my logic and hit my adrenaline. Take Marcus, my older brother, the golden child who could do no wrong. 3 years ago, he called me at 1 a.m. His voice was thick with tears, a sound that immediately sent me into crisis mode. He told me he had lost his job. He spun a tale about corporate downsizing and unfair management. The truth, which I found out much later, was that he had been fired for a gross violation of safety protocols because he thought the rules did not apply to him. But at that moment, all I heard was my big brother crying. He was 3 months behind on his mortgage. His wife was pregnant. He was going to lose his house. "Please, Allie," he had sobbed. "I cannot let Dad know. I cannot let them see me fail. I swear on my life I will pay you back. I just need a bridge." I was saving for my own down payment at the time. I had a vision board. I had a specific condominium complex in the city I had been eyeing for 2 years. But strong women hold the family together. Right, I transferred $10,500 to his account the next morning. That was my down payment. That was my safety net. Marcus kept the house. He got a new job 2 months later, but the repayment never happened. Every time I gently brought it up, he would get defensive, or change the subject, or talk about how expensive the new baby was. Eventually, it became awkward to ask. And then, at Christmas, I watched him give our parents a brand new, flat-screen television, playing the role of the successful, generous son, while I sat there silently, knowing that television was bought with the interest on money he owed me. Then there was Eli. If Marcus was the tragic hero, Eli was the chaotic jester. His needs were never investments, they were bailouts. "Al, it is just temporary," was his catchphrase. Last year, the small trouble he alluded to over the phone turned out to be a lawsuit. He had gotten drunk at a bar, started a fight, and broken a man's nose. The other guy was suing. Eli was facing criminal charges and a civil suit. "I cannot go to jail, Alice," he had whispered, looking small and pathetic in his apartment that smelled of stale beer. "It will ruin my life." I looked at him and saw the little boy who used to scrape his knees, not the 35-year-old man who refused to grow up. I hired the lawyer. I paid the retainer. $7,000 to make the problem go away. And how did the family rewrite that history at Thanksgiving? Linda told the aunts and uncles that Eli had been involved in an unfortunate misunderstanding, and that the family had rallied to support him. Rallied implied a group effort, but I checked my bank statement. There was only one donor name on that rally, But the moment that truly cemented my role and my resentment was when my father got sick. Gordon had a scare with his heart. It required surgery and a week in the hospital. I was the one who flew home. I was the one who slept in the uncomfortable chair next to his bed while Marcus and Eli sent thoughts and prayers texts from their living rooms. When the bills came, there was a gap, a significant gap that insurance refused to cover. My parents were in a panic. They were talking about taking a second mortgage, about selling the car. I did not let them. I walked down to the billing department and put $18,000 on my credit card. I took out a personal loan to cover it so the interest would not kill me. I handled it quietly, efficiently, because I did not want to add to their stress. When Gordon was recovered, we had a celebratory dinner. Linda raised a glass of sparkling cider. "To Gordon," she said, beaming, "and to the good Lord. We didn't know how we were going to manage those medical bills. But by some miracle, we scraped by. It just shows that if you have faith, the path provides." I sat there, sipping my water, thinking about the monthly loan payment of $450 that was currently being deducted from my paycheck. The path had not provided. Alice had provided. But in the mythology of the Ross family, Alice was just a background character, a mechanic who kept the stage machinery running so the stars could shine. You might wonder why I never said no. Why I never slammed my fist down and demanded accountability. The truth is, I tried. Once, 5 years ago. Marcus wanted to buy a luxury truck he had absolutely no business owning. He needed a co-signer. Linda called me, using her happy family voice, assuming it was a done deal. "I cannot do it, Mom," I had said. "It is too much risk. He can't afford the payments." The silence on the other end of the line was not empty. It was heavy. It was weaponized. "I see," Linda said. Her voice dropped 20 degrees. "I didn't realize you had become so selfish. Alice, after everything we have done for you, for 3 months, she froze me out. When I called, she was busy. When I emailed, I got one-line replies. But she was not silent with the rest of the world. I started getting calls from cousins and aunts, asking if I was okay, implying that they had heard I was having a breakdown or that I was turning my back on the family. She launched a smear campaign because I refused to sign a loan document. She weaponized the extended family against me. The shame was suffocating. I felt like a pariah. Eventually, I broke. I called Marcus. I co-signed the loan. Within 24 hours, Linda was back to being my loving mother. The warmth returned, but it felt artificial, like the heat from a sun lamp. I learned the lesson she wanted to teach me. My value in this family was directly tied to my utility. As long as I was useful, I was loved. If I stopped being useful, I was nothing. So, sitting at that holiday lunch today, listening to the clatter of silverware and the drone of the refrigerator, I realized that Linda's command to stop relying on the family was not a random outburst. It was the ultimate gaslighting. She was projecting. She was taking the very thing she was guilty of parasitic reliance and pinning it on me. It was a preemptive strike. Perhaps she sensed that I was getting tired. Perhaps she saw the way I looked at the bills lately. So she decided to rewrite the narrative first, to paint me as the needy one before I could expose them as the beggars. As I walked down the hallway toward my old bedroom, passing the framed photos of Marcus graduating debt paid by me and Eli on a fishing trip paid by me, the sadness began to evaporate, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I was not packing to run away. I was packing to abdicate. They wanted a daughter who was strong enough to carry them but weak enough to never complain about the weight. Well, they were about to find out that strength works both ways. The same strength that allowed me to carry them for 17 years was the same strength that would allow me to drop them without looking back. I opened the door to my childhood room. It looked exactly the same as it did when I was 18, preserved in amber, a shrine to a version of Alice that no longer existed. I pulled my suitcase from the closet. The zipper made a sharp, decisive sound, like a zipper on a body bag. This was not a tantrum. This was an audit. And the Ross family was about to fail it spectacularly. I placed my napkin on the table. It was a precise movement, aligning the linen edge with the rim of the charger plate. There was no shaking in my hands, no tremor of emotion. I treated that square of fabric like a closing contract, a final seal on a deal that had gone bad. "I am full," I said. My voice did not echo. It cut through the room, absorbing the ambient noise of the refrigerator and the low hum of the heating vent. "I am going home." I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, a wooden shriek that seemed too loud in the sudden vacuum of conversation. I waited for a beat, perhaps two, for the script to change. In any other family drama, this would be the moment where the mother gasps, the father slams his fist on the table, or the brothers block the doorway. But this was the Ross family. We did not do confrontation. We did passive aggression and denial. Linda looked up at me. She did not blink. She let out a short, sharp breath, a huff of air through her nose that was dismissive, almost amused. It was the sound you make when a waiter takes away a plate you were not quite finished with but do not care enough to keep. She looked at me not as her daughter who had just driven 2 hours to see her, but as a guest who had overstayed her welcome. "Drive safe," she said. That was it. No, I didn't mean it. No, please stay for dessert. Just a dismissal. She picked up her wine glass, swirling the red liquid, effectively erasing me from the room before I had even left it. My father, Gordon, was the one who almost broke. I saw his shoulders hunch, his spine curving under the weight of his own spinefulness. He looked at the mashed potatoes as if they held the secrets of the universe, refusing to meet my gaze. "Maybe," he started, his voice a dry rasp. He cleared his throat. Maybe your mother is just a little stressed. You know how the holidays get. Alice, the preparation, the cooking." It was a pathetic offering. He was handing me a lifeline made of cobwebs. He wanted me to accept the excuse, to nod and say, "Yes, of course, Mom is just tired," and sit back down so he would not have to feel the uncomfortable draft of a broken family. But notice what he did not say. He did not say, "You do not have to leave." He did not say, "Linda, apologize to your daughter." "Goodbye, Gordon," I said. Marcus was suddenly very interested in the label on the wine bottle. He turned it around in his hands, studying the vintage, desperate to avoid the reality that his safety net was walking out the door. But Eli, emboldened by the wine and his own arrogance, could not let it go. He leaned back in his chair, the legs creaking, and gave a small, careless shrug. "If Mom thinks so," he said, his voice slurred and heavy with unearned confidence. "Then there must be a reason. She is usually right about these things." That sentence was the final deadbolt sliding into place. There must be a reason. The reason, Eli, is that your legal fees cost more than my car. But you are too drunk on your own entitlement to read the ledger. I walked out of the dining room. I did not stomp. I did not slam the front door. I closed it with a soft click, the sound of a vault locking. The air outside was biting, a crisp December chill that felt cleaner than the stifling heat inside the house. I walked to my car, a sensible sedan that I had paid for in full. Maintenance up to date, insurance paid by me. I got in, turned the key, and felt the engine purr to life. As I backed out of the driveway, I looked at the house one last time. The yellow light spilled out from the dining room window. I could see their silhouettes. They were already eating again. The disruption was over. The glitch in the system had removed itself, and the machine was humming along, unaware that its power source had just been cut. The drive back to the city usually took 90 minutes. Tonight, I did it in 70. I drove with the radio off. I needed the silence. I needed to hear the tires on the asphalt, the wind rushing past the glass. I watched the landscape change from the manicured, deceptive perfection of Maple Ridge to the industrial, concrete honesty of the city. I lived in a high-rise downtown. My apartment was on the 14th floor. It was a space of steel, glass, and minimalism. It was cool, quiet, and excessively organized. Linda hated it. She told the aunts and uncles that it was cold and sterile, that it lacked a woman's touch. But she also told them something else. I remembered a family gathering 2 years ago where I overheard her talking to a cousin. "It is a lovely apartment," Linda had said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "We were happy to help her with the down payment. You know how hard it is for young people these days. We wanted her to be safe." I had frozen then, holding a tray of appetizers. It was a lie, a total fabrication. I had saved for 5 years for that down payment. I had eaten instant oatmeal for dinner for months. I had worked weekends, holidays, and double shifts. They had not contributed a single dime. In fact, the month I closed on the apartment, I had also paid their property tax bill because Gordon forgot and was facing a lien. But I had let it slide. I had let her have her story. I pulled into my parking garage, the transponder beeping as the gate lifted. I parked in my assigned spot. I took the elevator up, the numbers climbing steadily. When I unlocked my door, the silence of my apartment greeted me like an old friend. It was not the heavy, loaded silence of the dining room I had just left. This was a clean silence, a silence I owned. I did not turn on the lights immediately. I stood in the foyer, letting my eyes adjust to the ambient glow of the city lights filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I dropped my keys in the bowl. Clink. I did not turn on the television. I did not check my phone, which I knew was likely silent anyway. They would not call. They expected me to call them in a week. Apologizing for being dramatic, I walked into my bedroom. I pulled my suitcase out from the top shelf of the closet. It was a sturdy, hard-shell case, battered from business trips and the few vacations I allowed myself. I placed it on the bed and unzipped it. I had not unpacked from the trip to Maple Ridge yet, essentially because I had never really arrived. But I was not opening it to put things away. I was opening it to start a new inventory. I began to pull clothes from my dresser and my closet. I was not packing to leave the apartment. I was packing to segregate my life. I needed to see, physically, what I had bought with the life energy I had wasted on them. I pulled out a gray silk blouse. I held it up in the half-light. I bought this 3 years ago. I remembered the month exactly. It was the same month Marcus had his emergency with the car transmission. I had worked 20 hours of overtime that week to cover his repair bill because he needed his car for interviews for jobs he never took. I remembered wearing this blouse to the office on a Saturday, my eyes burning from lack of sleep, typing data into a spreadsheet while the cleaning crew vacuumed around me. This blouse was not just silk. It was woven from my exhaustion. I folded it neatly and placed it in the suitcase. Next, I pulled out a navy blue suit, sharp, tailored, professional. I wore this to the interview for my current position. I remembered the day I got the promotion. The salary bump was significant. I had called Linda, so excited to tell her. Her first reaction was not congratulations. Her first reaction was, "Oh, thank God. Alice, Eli is in a bit of a bind with his landlord, and we were worried." My promotion became their liquidity event. My success was immediately cannibalized to feed their failures. I looked at the suit. It should have been a symbol of my achievement. Instead, it was the uniform of their banker. I folded the jacket. I aligned the sleeves. Into the suitcase it went. Then, I reached for the item that hurt the most. It was a simple, oversized charcoal hoodie. It was soft, worn in the elbows. This was my armor. This was what I wore at night. Sitting at my kitchen island at 2 a.m, staring at the glowing screen of my laptop, logging into their bank accounts to balance their checkbooks. I could feel the phantom weight of those nights, the anxiety, the knot in my stomach as I moved money from my savings to their checking to prevent a bounce fee. The sheer physical exhaustion of trying to solve a math problem where the variables were 2 parents who refused to stop spending and 2 brothers who refused to start working. I held the hoodie to my face. It smelled of my detergent, clean and lavender, but the memory attached to it smelled of fear. Fear that they would lose the house. Fear that they would be embarrassed. Fear that I was not doing enough. I folded the hoodie. I smoothed the fabric. I was not packing to go on a trip. I was packing away the evidence. I was conducting a forensic audit of my own wardrobe. Each item was a receipt. Each fold was a redaction. I filled the suitcase until it was heavy. I zipped it shut. The sound was final, like a zipper on a body bag for a past life. I stood there in the quiet of my bedroom, looking at the silver case sitting on my duvet. It looked out of place, a disruption in the perfect order of my room, but it was necessary. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The lights were a sprawling grid of gold and white, thousands of people living their lives, paying their bills, facing their consequences. For 17 years, I had stood between my family and the consequences of their actions. I had been the dam holding back the water. I had been the insulation in the walls. I had been the invisible hand that fixed everything before they even knew it was broken. And they told me to stop relying on them. A laugh bubbled up in my throat. It was a dry, dark sound. The absurdity was almost beautiful. It was like a man jumping out of an airplane and telling his parachute to stop clinging to him. I turned back to the suitcase. I ran my hand over the cool, textured surface. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. My voice was steady. "You want independence? You want me to stand on my own?" I thought about the autopay schedules running on my server. I thought about the shared passwords. I thought about the credit cards linked to my social security number. "If they think I rely on them," I said, the words forming a promise in the cool air. "Let's see what happens when I stop." I sat at the kitchen island, the quartz countertop cool against my forearms. The only light in the apartment came from the glow of my laptop screen, casting a stark, sterile blue illumination across the room. It was the kind of light that left no shadows, the kind that made everything look clinical and exposed. It was fitting. I was about to perform an autopsy on my own life. I opened a blank spreadsheet. The cursor blinked, a rhythmic pulse waiting for input. I typed the file name in the top left corner, "Everything I pay for." It looked innocuous enough, just 4 words, but as I logged into my primary bank portal, I knew this document was going to be a testament to my own stupidity. I started with the basics. I opened the tab for the utility company in Maple Ridge. My parents had set up online billing years ago, but they always lost the password or got confused by the interface. For the last 7 years, the login credentials had been saved in my browser, not theirs. I pulled up the history: gas, electric, water. I entered the average monthly cost for the winter months into row 2. $350 for gas because Linda refused to wear a sweater indoors. $200 for electricity because Gordon left the garage lights on all night for security. $80 for water. I typed the numbers out. 350, 200, 80. Then I multiplied them by 12 months, then by 7 years. The number that appeared in the total column made me blink. It was the price of a decent used car. Just gone. Evaporated into heat and light for a house I had just been kicked out of. I moved to the next tab: telecommunications. They had the premium cable package because Gordon needed his sports channels and Linda needed her cooking shows in high definition. They had the highest speed internet tier because Marcus had complained the Wi-Fi was too slow when he visited with his gaming laptop. $190 a month, every month, for 6 years. I added it to the sheet. The total at the bottom jumped. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not pain, it was vertigo. I was looking at the raw data of my exploitation, and the scale of it was making me dizzy. I was a senior operations manager. I managed million-dollar logistics budgets for a living. I could spot a 0.05% variance in a shipping manifest from a mile away. Yet, in my own personal life, I had allowed a hemorrhage of capital so massive it would have gotten me fired if I had managed a client's account this way. I kept going. I logged into the insurance portal. There it was, Eli's policy. He drove a sporty coupe that had high premiums because of his age and his driving record. When he bought it, he had sworn he would handle the insurance if I just put it on my policy to get the multi-car discount. "I will Venmo you every month, Al," he had said. I searched my Venmo history. I found exactly 3 payments from Eli. The last one was 4 years ago. The memo line read, "Pizza and beer." I looked at the monthly premium, $185. I typed it into the spreadsheet. I added the deductible I had paid when he backed into a mailbox 3 winters ago, $500. The spreadsheet grew longer. The scroll bar on the right side of the screen shrank. Then I paused. I remembered something. I opened a new tab and logged into a credit card account. I rarely used a card with a high limit that I kept for emergencies. I scrolled back through the statements, searching for a specific date. 5 years ago. The summer the roof at the Maple Ridge house had started to leak. I remembered the family barbecue that August. My Uncle Jerry, a boisterous man who loved to take credit for things, had been slapping my father on the back. "Glad I could help you out with the contractor. Gordon," Jerry had bellowed for everyone to hear. "We cannot have the family getting rained on, right?" Everyone had toasted to Uncle Jerry's generosity. My parents had beamed, looking relieved and grateful. I found the transaction on my statement. August 12th. Roofing Specialists, Inc. $18,450. I stared at the number. Uncle Jerry had not paid for the roof. Uncle Jerry had recommended the contractor. That was his contribution. But when the bill came, my parents did not have the money. They were facing a lien on the house if they did not pay the contractor within 30 days. They had called me, crying, again. "We will pay you back when the tax refund comes," Linda had promised. I typed the number into the spreadsheet. $18,450. Next to it, in the notes column, I typed, "The Uncle Jerry roof." I checked my bank records for any deposits from them around tax season that year. 0. There was no repayment. There was only the interest I had paid on that card for 6 months before I could pay off the principal with my year-end bonus. I added the interest to the spreadsheet. $1,200. My fingers flew across the keyboard now. I was in a trance. I was excavating the ruins of my financial history, brushing away the dirt of family obligation to reveal the hard artifacts of theft. I remembered Marcus's startup, 2 years ago. Marcus had decided he was going to revolutionize the local delivery market. He launched a company called SwiftPath. He made business cards. He built a website. He told everyone at church that he was a CEO. He needed a small business loan to buy the initial software licenses and register the LLC, but his credit score was in the low 500s. He could not even get approved for a store credit card. "It is just a small bridge loan, Alice," he had said. $5,000. "The business will be profitable in 90 days. You are investing in the future." I logged into the loan service portal. The account was still active. I looked at the payment history. Every single month, $55.20 was deducted from my checking account. I checked the last login on the account. It had been accessed 18 months ago. Marcus had forgotten this loan even existed. He had dissolved SwiftPath a year ago when he got bored. But he never closed the loan account. He just stopped thinking about it because the money was not leaving his pocket. I checked the balance. $3,200 remaining. I added the total paid so far to the spreadsheet. I added the remaining balance to the liabilities column. And then, I reached the item that made my breath catch in my throat. The lake house. It was a small cabin 2 hours north, on the edge of a decent-sized lake. My parents called it the Sanctuary. It was where they spent their summers. It was where they hosted the 4th of July parties for the extended family. I had not been invited to stay overnight at the lake house in 4 years. "There just is not enough room, honey," Linda would say, with Marcus and the kids, and Eli bringing his friends. "The sofa bed is broken, you understand." I understood. I was not part of the leisure class of the family. I was the workforce. I opened the dedicated folder on my laptop for the lake house. Homeowners Association fees $350 a quarter, paid by Alice Ross. Boat slip rental fee, $800 a season, paid by Alice Ross. Property tax, $4,200 a year, paid by Alice Ross. Utilities which they left running all winter to keep the pipes from freezing $200 a month on average, paid by Alice Ross. I looked at a photo on my phone from last July. It was a Facebook post from Linda. She was holding a glass of wine on the deck of the cabin, the sunset reflecting off the water behind her. The caption read, "So blessed to have this little slice of heaven. Hard work pays off." I felt a cold burn in my stomach. Hard work did pay off. My hard work, paying for her view. I typed every single figure into the spreadsheet: the HOA fees, the taxes, the boat slip for a boat I was not allowed to drive. I scrolled down to the bottom of the spreadsheet. I highlighted the total cell. I formatted it to be bold. I formatted it to be red. I looked at the number. It was not just a number. It was a retirement fund. It was a house. It was a trip around the world. It was my freedom, siphoned off dollar by dollar, month by month, to subsidize the delusions of 4 adults who treated me like a servant. $142,678.42. That was the conservative estimate. That did not include the cash I had handed them for groceries, the loans that were never written down, the dinners I paid for, the flights I booked. I sat back in my chair. The apartment was silent. The city lights outside were indifferent. $142,000. If I had walked into that dining room today and told them I had given them nearly $150,000 over the last decade, they would have laughed. They would have called me a liar. They had erased the transactions from their minds the moment the money cleared. I looked at the number again. Then, I closed the spreadsheet. I did not need to see it anymore. I had the data. Now, I needed to execute the strategy. I opened the browser tabs again. First, the electric company. I navigated to the billing section. I found the auto pay toggle. It was green. I clicked it. A pop-up window appeared. Are you sure you want to disable automatic payments? You may incur late fees if bills are not paid by the due date. I moved my mouse. I clicked yes. The toggle turned gray. Next, the gas company. Same process. Are you sure? Yes, I am sure. Click, the cable company. This one was trickier. They tried to offer me a discount to stay. I ignored the pop-ups. I found the payment methods. I removed my credit card from the file. Delete payment method. Click. I moved to the insurance portal. Eli's car. I did not cancel the policy that would be malicious and perhaps illegal without notifying him, but I removed the billing connection. I changed the billing address to my parents' house in Maple Ridge. I changed the notification setting from email to Alice to mail to policyholder. The next time a bill came, it would land in their mailbox, and when they ignored it, the cancellation notice would land there too. I went to the loan portal for Marcus's business. I could not cancel the loan, but I stopped the automatic transfer. I set the payment source to manual. I deleted my checking account details. Good luck. CEO, finally, the lake house. I turned off the HOA autopay. I turned off the utility autopay. I removed my card from the property tax portal. It took me 45 minutes. 45 minutes to dismantle a financial ecosystem that had taken 17 years to build. Each click was a physical sensation. It felt like cutting a wire on a bomb that had been strapped to my chest. Snip, the electricity. Snip, the gas. Snip, the insurance. With every confirmation screen, I felt lighter. The crushing weight that had been sitting on my shoulders since I was 22 years old, the fear of them failing, the fear of them drowning was lifting. I was letting them fall, and for the first time, I realized that I was not the one who would hit the ground. I closed the browser. The screen went back to my desktop background, a generic landscape of a mountain range. I was done with the digital world. I needed paper. I stood up and walked to the filing cabinet in the corner of my living room. It was locked. I kept the key in a hollow book on the bookshelf. I retrieved the key, unlocked the drawer, and pulled out a thick, accordion-style folder labeled Lake House Legal. I carried it back to the island. My lawyer, a cynical man named Mr. Mads Henderson, had forced me to keep these originals. Families get messy, Alice, he had told me 10 years ago. Keep the wet signatures. Never rely on a digital copy they can claim was altered. I opened the folder. The smell of old paper drifted up. I shuffled through the inspections, the deed transfer tax receipts, the survey maps, and then I found it. The document was stapled at the top corner. Occupancy and ownership agreement. I smoothed it out on the counter. 10 years ago, when we bought the lake house, my credit was perfect, and theirs was in shambles. The bank would not touch them, but they wanted the house so badly. They wanted the status. So, We made a deal. I would be the primary borrower. The deed would list all three of us, Alice, Linda, and Gordon, to satisfy their ego, but the bank required a side agreement to clarify the liability, and Mr. Henderson had slipped in a clause Linda and Gordon had barely glanced at because they were too busy picking out curtains in their minds. I turned to page 4. Paragraph 7. In the event of a dispute regarding the property, I read the words. I knew them by heart, but seeing them in black ink, signed in Linda's looping, arrogant handwriting, gave me a shiver of satisfaction. She had signed it because she thought I would never use it. She had signed it because she thought I was a permanent fixture, a silent partner who would never demand a vote. She had signed it for convenience. I ran my finger over her signature. It was dated October 14th, 10 years ago. Stop relying on the family, she had said. I looked at the document. Okay, Mom, I whispered. I will not rely on you. I will rely on this. I closed the folder. The investigation was complete. The evidence was gathered. The funding was cut. I turned off the laptop. The blue light vanished, plunging the room into darkness. But I was not afraid of the dark. For the first time in years, I could see everything clearly. The papers were spread out across my kitchen island like the autopsy report of a relationship that had died long ago. The document, titled Occupancy and Ownership Agreement, was 10 years old. The paper had that distinct, slightly brittle feel of files that have sat in a climate-controlled drawer for a decade, untouched and unloved. The edges were just starting to yellow, a physical testament to how much time had passed since I was 29 years old and desperate to please. I ran my hand over the signatures on the last page. There was Linda's signature large, looping, taking up more space than the line allowed, the L sweeping down with a flourish that screamed importance. Beside it was Gordon's small, cramped, barely legible, the mark of a man who signed whatever was put in front of him to keep the peace. And then there was mine. I stared at my own name. The ink looked hesitant. I remembered that day in the lawyer's office. I had been terrified. I was committing to a 30-year mortgage on a property I would not live in, all because my mother had cried about creating a legacy, and my father had looked at the floor. I remembered feeling like an imposter, a young woman playing at being an adult, signing her life away to buy her parents' happiness. Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, had been a sharp-eyed man with a suit that cost more than my car. He had looked at me, then at my parents, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. He knew exactly what was happening. He had drafted this specific agreement, insisting it was necessary for the lender, though I suspected now it was necessary for my protection. I turned back to page 4. The text was dense, a wall of legal jargon that most people skimmed over. 10 years ago, I had skimmed it too. I had trusted my mother when she said, "It is just standard boilerplate. Alice, don't worry your pretty head about it." But tonight, in the silence of my apartment, I was not skimming, I was dissecting. I read through the clauses about maintenance responsibilities, which they had ignored, and tax liabilities, which I had paid. And then, my finger stopped at paragraph 8. Subsection C. It was a block of text I had completely forgotten. Mr. Henderson had explained it quickly. Something about protecting the primary financial contributor in the event of a dispute. But at the time, I could not imagine a dispute. We were family. I read the words aloud, my voice low in the empty kitchen. In the event that any secondary party defined herein as Linda Ross or Gordon Ross attempts to contest the primary party's Alice Ross ownership interest, or attempts to encumber, sell, or transfer any portion of the property without the express written consent of the primary party, such action shall be deemed a material breach of this agreement. I paused. That was standard. But the next sentence was the landmine. Upon such a breach, the secondary party's right of occupancy shall immediately terminate, and all decision-making authority regarding the disposition of the property, including sale or lease, shall revert exclusively to the primary party. No further signatures from the secondary parties shall be required to execute a transfer of title or sale. I read it again, and then a third time. I sat back. the breath leaving my lungs in a rush. For years, I had walked around believing that the lake house was a 50-50 split. I thought that because their names were on the deed alongside mine, they held equal power. I thought that if I ever wanted to sell, I would need their permission. I thought I was trapped in a stalemate where I paid the bills but they held the keys. I was wrong. Mr. Henderson had planted a kill switch in the contract. He had rigged the game in my favor 10 years ago, anticipating exactly this moment. The clause basically said that if they ever tried to push me out, or if they ever tried to claim the house was theirs to do with as they pleased against my will, they forfeited their rights. They essentially fired themselves. The feeling that washed over me was not excitement. It was a cold, stunning shock. It was the realization that I had been walking through a prison cell for a decade, thinking I was locked in, when the door had been unlocked the entire time. I just had never bothered to turn the handle. I looked at the document with new eyes. It was not just a contract, it was a shield. My mind flashed back to last summer, the 4th of July. The memory was so vivid, I could almost smell the charcoal and the sunscreen. Linda was sitting on the deck, holding court with the neighbors from the next cabin over. She was wearing a white linen caftan, looking every inch the wealthy matriarch. I was inside, scrubbing the kitchen counter because Eli had spilled margarita mix and left it to get sticky. Through the screen door, I heard her voice, loud and proud. "Oh, we just love it here," Linda had said, gesturing expansively at the water. "Gordon and I scrimped and saved for years to make this happen. You know how it is? You want a place for the grandchildren to remember. It takes a lot of sacrifice, but seeing the family together makes it all worth it." "Sacrifice," I whispered to the empty room. The only thing Linda had sacrificed was her signature on a piece of paper. I had paid the down payment. I had paid the monthly mortgage. I had paid for the new deck she was sitting on. I had paid for the roof over her head. She had erased me from the narrative of that house so completely that she actually believed her own lie. She believed she owned it. She believed it was her right. And because she believed it, she felt comfortable telling me to stop relying on the family, never suspecting that the very ground she stood on at the sanctuary was leased from my bank account. The anger that had been simmering in my gut cooled down into something harder. It solidified. It became a weapon. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. But they were bringing emotional manipulation to a gunfight, and I was holding a legal bazooka. I reached for my phone. My hands were steady. I opened the camera app and took high-resolution photos of the document. I photographed the cover page. I photographed the signatures. And I took 3 photos of paragraph 8, subsection C, making sure the lighting was perfect and the text was razor sharp. I opened my email app. I typed in Mr. Henderson's name. His address auto-populated. He was still practicing, still a partner at the firm downtown. Subject question about lake house agreement. Ross family. I kept the body of the email short. I did not want to sound like a hysterical daughter venting about her mother. I wanted to sound like a client reviewing her assets. "Dear Mr. Henderson, I hope this email finds you well. I am reviewing my financial records and the original documents for the property at 124 Lakeview Drive. I have attached an image of the occupancy agreement we signed 10 years ago. Could you please confirm my understanding of paragraph 8, subsection C? Specifically, if the other parties were to formally attempt to exclude me from the property or alter the ownership structure against my wishes, does this trigger the automatic reversion of control described in the text? I want to make sure I am reading this correctly before I take any next steps. Best regards, Alice Ross." I hit send. The little whoosh sound of the email departing felt incredibly satisfying. It was done. The question was asked. I looked at the clock on the microwave. It was 11:15 at night. I did not expect a reply until Monday morning. Lawyers like Mr. Henderson did not work on holiday weekends, and they certainly did not answer emails near midnight. I stood up and walked to the window. The city was asleep, or as asleep as it ever got. I felt a strange sense of detachment. The Alice who had cried in the bathroom because her mother criticized her haircut was gone. The Alice who had eaten ramen so her brother could have a lawyer was gone. I turned back to the counter to gather the papers. I was going to put them back in the safe, But I hesitated. No, I would leave them out. I might need them again soon. Suddenly, my phone buzzed against the quartz countertop. I frowned. It was probably a spam notification or a late-night email from work. I picked it up. A notification from Gmail. Reply from Henderson. James. I blinked. He was awake, and he was answering. I unlocked the phone and opened the email. It was brief, written from a mobile device, likely typed with one thumb while he sat in his own study, perhaps remembering the young woman he had pitied 10 years ago. Alice, good to hear from you. I remember this file well. You are reading it correctly. In fact, that clause is stronger than most people realize. It was designed to prevent exactly the kind of situation I suspect you are dealing with. If they make a move to challenge your title or constructive ownership, they trigger the default. It effectively bypasses the need for a partition suit. We should talk on Monday. Do not sign anything new until we speak. Jim Henderson. I stared at the screen. The white light illuminated the small smile that was forming on my lips, a smile that did not reach my eyes. Stronger than most people realize. He knew. He had known 10 years ago that my parents were sharks, and he had built me a cage that looked like a house to keep me safe from them. I set the phone down. The game had changed. Linda thought she had played a power card at lunch. She thought that by kicking me out, she was punishing me, cutting me off from the warmth of the family. She thought the worst thing she could do to me was break my heart. She was wrong. She was about to find out that she had started a war with her landlord. I looked at the yellowed papers one last time. I ran my thumb over the text of paragraph 8. If Linda really wanted to push me out of the family, she would eventually have to formalize it. She was too controlling to leave loose ends. She would want her name on the deed. She would want to secure the lake house for Marcus's children or for Eli's future. She would try to take the property legally, thinking she could bully me into signing a quitclaim deed just like she bullied me into co-signing loans. She would come for the assets. She always did. And when she did, she would be walking right into the trap Mr. Henderson had set 10 years ago. I turned off the kitchen light. The darkness was absolute now, but I did not feel lost. I felt like a general who had just looked at the map and realized the enemy had pitched their tents in the middle of a minefield. I went to my bedroom, leaving the contract on the table. It was ready. I was ready. Your move, Mother, I whispered into the dark. The silence lasted for exactly 72 hours. It was a beautiful, golden silence, the kind you experience after a loud, humming refrigerator finally stops running. I went to work. I sat in my office. I drank coffee that I paid for. I slept in sheets that I owned. I felt a strange, vibrating lightness, as if gravity had released its hold on my ankles. But I knew the laws of physics, and I knew the laws of the Ross family. A vacuum cannot exist forever. Eventually, the pressure would force something to rush in. It started on a Tuesday evening. I was sitting on my sofa, reading a book, when my phone began to buzz against the coffee table. It was Eli. I looked at the screen. I did not answer. I watched the name flash and fade. He called again immediately, and a third time. On the fourth attempt, I picked up. I did not say hello. I just pressed the green button and held the phone to my ear, waiting. Alice. Eli's voice was high-pitched, laced with a panic that sounded almost theatrical. Alice, are you there? Thank God. I have been calling for 10 minutes. I am here, Eli, I said. My voice was calm, flat. What is the emergency? The emergency is that I am freezing to death, he shouted. I am at the lake house. I came up with a few friends for a midweek ski trip. You know, just to blow off some steam after the holiday stress. And nothing works. The heat is off. The lights won't turn on. The Wi-Fi is dead. I cannot even get the smart lock on the back door to engage. I took a sip of my tea. That sounds uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. It is 5 degrees outside. Alice. We are sitting here in our coats. I called the power company, and they said the account has been closed. Closed. And then, get this. The property manager from the Homeowners Association came by 10 minutes ago. He saw our cars and started banging on the door. He says there are outstanding dues and he's threatening to tow my car if I do not pay $350 in administrative late fees right now. He paused, waiting for me to gasp. He was waiting for the reflex. He expected me to say, "Oh no, put him on the phone. I will give him my card number." He expected me to log into the utility portal and make an emergency payment to restore the power. "Alice," he prompted, "did you hear me? You need to fix this. The guy is standing right there." "I heard you, Eli," I said. "And you are right." "Right about what?" "It is incredibly difficult when you do not have anyone to handle these things for you," I said. "I imagine it is very stressful." There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was the silence of a brain trying to process a foreign language. "What are you talking about?" His voice dropped, losing the panic and gaining an edge of anger. "I don't need a lecture. I need the electricity. Just log in and pay the bill. I will pay you back later." "No," I said. "What?" "No," I repeated. "I closed the accounts. Eli, I canceled the auto pay. Mom told me to stop relying on the family, so I stopped relying on the family to use my money. The utilities were in my name. I turned them off." You turned them off." He sounded horrified, as if I had confessed to murder. "But we are here, we have plans. You knew I used the cabin in January." "I did not know anything," I said, "because nobody asked me, and nobody invited me." "This is vindictive," he spat. The charm was gone now. The baby brother mask had slipped off, revealing the spoiled 35-year-old man beneath. "You are trying to punish us. You are trying to ruin the family tradition. Do you know how embarrassing this is? My friends are watching me argue with a property manager. You are humiliating me." "I am not doing anything to you, Eli," I said. "I am simply not doing anything for you. There is a difference. If you want power, call the electric company and open an account in your name. If you want to park, pay the fee. Welcome to adulthood." I hung up. I did not feel guilty. I felt a surge of adrenaline, sharp and clean. 20 minutes later, the phone rang again. It was Marcus. Marcus never called just to chat. He called when he needed something strategic. His voice was tight, controlled, the voice he used when he was trying to intimidate a waiter. "Alice," he said, "we have a problem with the business account." "I don't have a business, Marcus," I said. "The loan?" he snapped. "The payment for the startup loan. I just got a notification that the transfer failed. Insufficient funds or invalid source. I called the bank, and they said the external funding source, your account was removed." "That is correct," I said. "You cannot just remove it," he said, sounding incredulous. "That is the operating capital. That is how the loan gets serviced. If that payment is late, it hits my credit score. I am trying to refinance my house. Alice, you know this. A missed payment could drop my score by 50 points. "That sounds like a significant risk for you," I said. "Fix it," he commanded. "I do not know what kind of game you are playing with Mom, but leave my finances out of it. Put the account back on. We can talk about whatever little feelings you have later. But this is business." "It is not business, Marcus," I said. "It is charity. It has been charity for 2 years, and the charity is closed." "It is a family account," he shouted, his control breaking. "We agreed. You said you would support the company." "I said I would help you start," I corrected him. "I did not say I would carry you for 2 years after you stopped working. The company does not exist. Marcus, you dissolved it. The only thing that exists is your debt, and it is yours, not ours, yours. If my credit score tanks, I will never forgive you," he threatened. "I will tell everyone. I will tell them you sabotaged me." "You can tell them whatever you want," I said, "but tell them quickly before your phone gets cut off. I removed my card from your plan, too." I hung up on him, too. I placed the phone face down on the table. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer physical effort of breaking a 17-year habit of saying yes. Then came the silence from Linda. Linda was too smart to call. A phone call is immediate. A phone call allows for interruption. A phone call leaves no record. Linda preferred to write, because in writing, she could craft the sermon. The messages started arriving at 10 o'clock that night. They came in a rapid-fire stream. A wall of blue bubbles. I just got off the phone with your brothers. I am sitting here shaking. I cannot believe my own daughter could be so cruel. Your father is upstairs crying. He cannot understand why you would attack your brothers like this. They have done nothing to you. We always did our best for you. Alice, we gave you everything. We gave you a home. We gave you values. And this is how you repay us. By cutting off the heat on your brother in the middle of winter. By trying to ruin Marcus's financial future. God sees everything. Alice, you can leave the table, but you cannot leave his sight. You are breaking your father's heart. You are destroying this family over money. Money is temporary. Family is forever. If you had just apologized, we could have moved on. I could have introduced you to the new deacon next Sunday. I wanted to tell him what a good, obedient daughter you were. But now, how can I defend you? I read the messages. I read them twice. Obedient, I whispered. That was the word. Not loving, not kind, not successful, obedient. She did not want a daughter. She wanted a golden retriever with a checkbook. I did not reply. I took screenshots of every single message. I created a new folder on my phone labeled Evidence. I saved the screenshots there. The next morning, the second wave hit. This time, it was the extended network. Linda had activated the flying monkeys. I received a text from my Aunt Sarah. Sarah was Linda's younger sister. A woman who lived for gossip and drama. Alice. The message read, I am hearing very disturbing things from your mother. She says you have drained the family accounts. She says you cut them off and stole the money that was meant for the house. I hope this is a misunderstanding. Your parents are elderly. To abandon them and take their savings is a sin. Alice, please call me. I stared at the screen. Stole. The narrative had shifted. It was no longer that I had stopped paying. It was that I had taken. Linda had twisted the story so effectively that in her version, the money I had stopped giving was money I had somehow robbed from them. She had converted her entitlement into my criminality. I felt a flash of white-hot rage. I wanted to call Sarah. I wanted to scream. I wanted to send her the spreadsheets, the bank statements, the years of receipts. But I stopped myself. If I engaged, I looked defensive. If I argued, I looked guilty. I took a screenshot of Aunt Sarah's text. I saved it to the folder. I was not a daughter anymore. I was a prosecutor building a case. Every lie they told, every accusation they made, was just another brick in the wall I was building between us. I needed them to talk. I needed them to lie. Because the more they lied now, the harder they would fall when the truth came out. I went through the rest of the week like a ghost. I worked, I ate, I organized my files. Then, on Friday evening, the escalation I had been waiting for finally arrived. It came in the form of an email. It was not from a family member. It was from a law firm I did not recognize, Miller Associates. The subject line was Re-Property Title Adjustment, 124 Lakeview Drive. My heart hammered against my ribs. I sat down at my computer and opened it. Dear Ms. Ross, we represent Mr. Gordon Ross and Mrs. Linda Ross regarding the property located at 124 Lakeview Drive. It has come to our attention that the current deed structure does not accurately reflect the original intent of the parties involved, nor does it reflect the equitable contributions made by your parents over the last decade. Your parents assert that the property was purchased with family funds and that your name was placed on the deed solely for financing convenience. They are requesting that you sign the attached quitclaim deed to transfer full ownership to them, to rectify this clerical oversight and restore the property to its rightful owners. Please review the attached documents and return them signed within 14 days to avoid further legal action to quiet title. Sincerely, Gregory Miller, Esquire. I read the email. I read the threat. Legal action to quiet title. They were trying to steal the house. Linda had realized that emotional manipulation was not working. The text messages had failed. The guilt trips had bounced off. So she had decided to escalate. She had convinced herself that because she felt like the owner, she was the owner. She had gone to a lawyer, told him a sob story about a manipulative daughter who tricked them onto the deed, and authorized him to send this letter. I sat back in my chair. The apartment was dark, save for the glow of the screen. A smile touched my lips. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a chess player who watches their opponent move their queen directly into the path of a sniper. Linda had made a fatal error. As long as this was just a family dispute, it was messy. It was he said, she said. It was guilt and obligation but we are family. But by hiring a lawyer, by sending a formal legal demand to alter the ownership, she had left the realm of feelings. She had entered the realm of contracts. She had stepped out of the kitchen and into the courtroom. And she had not read the contract. She did not know about paragraph 8, subsection C. By sending this letter, by formally stating that she wanted to remove my interest in the property, she had just provided the written proof required to trigger the clause. She had just handed me the smoking gun I needed to strip her of her rights entirely. She thought she was firing a warning shot. In reality, she had just pulled the pin on a grenade and dropped it in her own lap. I saved the email as a PDF. I forwarded it to Mr. Henderson with 2 words. It began. I looked at the screen, at the arrogant demand to rectify this clerical oversight. "Oh, Mother," I whispered. "We are going to rectify it. We are going to rectify it exactly according to the document you signed." I closed the laptop. The week of panic was over. The week of war had begun. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who was going to win. Mr. Henderson's office had not changed in 10 years. It still smelled of leather polish, old books, and the expensive, understated cologne of a man who charged $400 an hour to solve other people's disasters. The only difference was that 10 years ago, I had sat in one of his wingback chairs feeling like a fraud, a child playing dress-up in a world of serious adults. Today, I sat there as a client who had brought the receipts. I placed the 2 documents on his mahogany desk. On the left was the original occupancy and ownership agreement, the paper slightly yellowed, bearing the signatures of a family that no longer existed in spirit. On the right was the fresh, crisp letter from Miller Associates, the threat my mother had paid a stranger to send me. Mr. Henderson put on his reading glasses. He was a man of few words, a pragmatic creature who viewed emotions as inefficiencies in the legal process. He picked up the letter from Gregory Miller. He read it once, then he read it again. He set it down and picked up the original agreement. He turned to page 4, paragraph 8. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. I watched his eyes move back and forth between the 2 pieces of paper. I waited for him to tell me I was wrong. I waited for him to tell me that a mother's claim trumped a contract, or that a judge would look at my parents' age and pity them, rendering my legal shield useless. Instead, Mr. Henderson let out a sound that was half sigh, half chuckle. It was a dry, dusty sound. "This," he said, tapping his finger on the letter from my mother's lawyer, "is a gift, Alice. I rarely see opposing counsel make a mistake this fundamental." "Explain it to me," I said. Though I already suspected the answer, I needed to hear it from him. I needed the verification to settle into my bones. "The agreement we drafted 10 years ago was very specific," Mr. Henderson said, leaning back in his chair and steepling his fingers. "We included a trigger clause. It stated that any attempt by the secondary parties, your parents, to contest your title, or to assert ownership beyond their life estate usage, would constitute a material breach." He picked up the letter again. "By sending this letter," he continued, "they have formally put their intentions in writing. They are not just grumbling at a dinner table. They have hired a legal representative to demand a quitclaim deed. They have explicitly stated that the current deed does not reflect their intent and are demanding a transfer of title." He looked at me over the rims of his glasses. "In the eyes of the law, this is an act of aggression against the contract. They have pulled the trigger, but they didn't realize the gun was pointed at their own feet." He turned the old agreement around so it faced me. He pointed to the clause I had read in my kitchen. Any attempt to remove Alice from ownership or materially alter her interest. This clause, he said, his voice dropping to a serious, professional register, dictates the penalty for such a breach. The penalty is the immediate forfeiture of their occupancy rights and the reversion of all decision-making authority to you. Effectively, by demanding the house, they have lost their right to step foot in it. I stared at the papers. It was almost too poetic to be real. My mother, in her desperate need to control everything, in her arrogance to assume she could bully reality into the shape she wanted, had signed her own eviction notice. She had tried to grab the one thing I held, and in doing so, she had let go of the only rope keeping her safe. So, right now, I asked, my voice steady, what does the law say? Not morally, not emotionally, legally. Mr. Henderson took off his glasses and folded them. On paper, the lake house is effectively yours, outright, if we choose to enforce it, he said. We do not need to argue about who paid for the roof or who paid the taxes. Although those records certainly help, we have this letter. This letter is proof they tried to breach the contract. We can file for a declaratory judgment tomorrow. We can change the locks on Friday. They have zero legal standing to stop you. I sat back in the leather chair. I expected to feel a rush of triumph. I expected the surge of dopamine that comes with winning a game or closing a massive deal at work. I expected to want to laugh, but I did not laugh. Instead, I felt the room stop spinning. For 17 years, my life had felt like it was built on a fault line. I was always waiting for the earthquake, the phone call about a debt, the guilt trip about a missed holiday, the demand for more. I had lived in a state of perpetual bracing. My muscles tensed to catch them when they fell. Now, the ground beneath me solidified. It was concrete. It was steel. It was immovable. They could not hurt me anymore. They could not take my home. They could not ruin my credit. They could not gaslight me into believing I was the parasite. The law, cold, hard, and indifferent to their tears, was on my side. Alice, Mr. Henderson asked gently, "Are you all right?" "I am fine," I said. "I am just adjusting to the gravity." "What do you want to do?" he asked. He pulled a yellow legal pad toward him and uncapped a pen. "We have options. Option A. We file the motion immediately. We send a notice to vacate. We enforce the breach. It is aggressive, but it is clean." He wrote Option A on the pad. "Option B," he continued. "We sell the property. Since the breach gives you sole authority, you don't need their signatures. We list it, sell it, and you take the equity as reimbursement for the funds you have laid out over the years." He looked up at me. "Or Option C, we use this as leverage. We negotiate, but given the personality types involved, I usually advise against negotiating with terrorists, emotional or otherwise." I looked at the window, watching the traffic on the street below. People were rushing to lunch, rushing to meetings, living their normal lives. If I chose Option A, I would simply be the villain in their story forever. Linda would tell everyone I stole the house. She would play the victim until her dying breath, and she would never, ever understand what actually happened. She would never understand that she did this to herself. If I chose Option B, I would get my money back, but the narrative would remain unfinished. It would just be a transaction. I did not just want to win the legal battle. I wanted to win the truth. I wanted them to see it. I wanted them to see the numbers. I wanted to strip away the family helping family mythology and force them to look at the raw data of their own parasitism. I wanted to hold up a mirror so clear and so bright that they could not look away. "I do not want to file the motion yet," I said. Mr. Henderson raised an eyebrow. "You want to give them a second chance?" "No," I said. "I want to give them a presentation." I reached into my bag and pulled out the thick folder containing my spreadsheets, the everything I pay for file. I placed it on the desk next to the legal documents. "They think I am doing this because I am petty," I said. "They think I am throwing a tantrum because my feelings were hurt at lunch. They have absolutely no concept of the reality of our financial relationship. If I evict them now, They will just tell the world I am a monster. I want them to know why this is happening. You want a confrontation. Mr. Henderson said, I want a closing statement. I corrected him. I looked at the lawyer. I want to have a meeting, a family meeting, all of them, Linda, Gordon, Marcus, Eli, and I want you there. Me? He looked skeptical. I usually charge a significant retainer for field trips. Alice? I will pay it, I said without hesitation. I want you there not to argue, but to witness. I want you to bring the original contract. I want you to sit there and represent the reality of the law, while I represent the reality of the money. He tapped his pen on the pad. Where do you want to do this? Their house? No, I said immediately. Not their territory, and not my apartment. I don't want them in my sanctuary. I thought about the geography of our town. I needed a place that was public enough to force them to maintain some level of decorum. Linda cared too much about appearances to scream in a restaurant, but private enough that we could speak freely. There is a diner on Route 9, I said. The Oakwood Grill. It is halfway between the city and Maple Ridge. It has high booths in the back. It is neutral ground. The Oakwood Grill, Mr. Henderson repeated, writing it down. A bit cinematic, isn't it? This whole situation is a bad melodrama. Mr. Henderson, I said, I am just writing the final act. When? Sunday, I said. That gives them 2 days to stew. 2 days to think they have the upper hand because I haven't responded to their lawyer's letter yet. Mr. Henderson nodded. He looked at me with a newfound respect. He saw that the frightened girl he remembered had been replaced by a woman who approached her family's destruction with the same logistical precision she used to manage supply chains. I will draft a response to Mr. Miller, he said. I will tell him that his client's request has been received and that we will provide a formal response in person on Sunday. I will imply that we are open to discussion. That should bait the hook. Perfect, I said. Alice, he said, pausing as I gathered my things. You know that even if you show them the truth, they might not accept it. People like that. They protect their delusions fiercely. I know, I said. I stood up, smoothing my coat. I don't need them to accept it. I just need them to hear it. Once the words are out in the air, once the numbers are on the table, I am free. What they do with the truth is their problem. My problem is that I have been carrying it for them. I walked to the door. Sunday at noon, I said. I will send you the calendar invite. I left the office and stepped out into the cool afternoon air. The city sounded different now. The noise wasn't chaotic. It was industrious. I walked to my car, my mind already organizing the next 48 hours. I had to print 3 copies of the dossier. I had to tabulate the final interest calculations. I had to buy a new outfit, something sharp, something that said CEO, not daughter. I was not going to a family reunion. I was going to a board meeting where the shareholders were about to find out the company was bankrupt and the CEO was resigning. And for the first time in 17 years, I wasn't afraid of what my mother would say. I had the law in my pocket and the ledger in my hand. Let them bring their guilt trips. I was bringing the receipt. The sound of a laser printer working in a quiet room is a rhythmic, almost hypnotic noise. Whir, click, slide, whir, click, slide. For 3 nights leading up to Sunday, that sound was the soundtrack of my life. I was not sleeping much, but I was not tired. I was fueled by a cold, precise energy, the kind I usually reserved for quarterly audits at work. I had turned my dining room table into a war room. The spreadsheet I had named Everything I Pay For was no longer just digital data on a screen. It was physical. It was heavy. I had printed it out on high-quality, 24-pound bright white paper. It felt substantial in the hand, authoritative. I had spent hours combing through old filing boxes, digital archives, and cloud storage to find the supporting documents. I did not want this to be my word against theirs. In the Ross family, my word was always subject to revision. If I said, "I paid for the roof," Linda would say, "Oh, you helped a little, but your uncle arranged it." I needed to kill the helped a little narrative. I needed to murder the ambiguity with ink and paper. I used a yellow highlighter to mark the dates. I used a pink highlighter to mark the totals. I found the credit card statement from the month the roof was fixed. There it was, clear as day. Roofing Specialists, Inc., $18,450. I stapled a copy of that statement to a photo I had dug up from Facebook, a picture of my parents standing under the new roof, holding a thank you sign they had made for Uncle Jerry. The juxtaposition was brutal. The photo showed the lie. The statement showed the truth. I found the wire transfer confirmation for the hospital bills, $18,000. I clipped it to the Get Well Soon card Linda had sent to the church group, thanking God for his miraculous provision. I was the miracle. I was the provision. And here was the receipt. I organized the files chronologically. The early years were thin, a few utility bills here, a credit card payoff there, but as the pages turned, as the years progressed, the stack grew thicker. The loans to Marcus became more frequent. The emergencies for Eli became more expensive. The maintenance on the lake house became a fixed, bleeding wound in my finances. It was like watching a parasite grow in real time. I created 3 identical binders. I went to the office supply store and bought heavy-duty black binders with clear plastic covers. I wanted them to look professional. I wanted them to look like legal discovery documents, not a scrapbook of grievances. 1 binder for Linda and Gordon. 1 binder for Marcus and Eli to share, because they had always shared the spoils of my labor. 1 binder for me, the master copy. I used colored tabs to separate the sections. Tab 1, Utilities and Household Expenses. Tab 2, Crisis Management, Medical and Legal. Tab 3, Loans and Investments. Marcus. Tab 4, The Lake House. Tab 5, The Conclusion. Tab 5 was the most important. It contained only 2 pieces of paper. The first was the letter from their lawyer, Gregory Miller, demanding the deed. The second was the original occupancy and ownership agreement, with paragraph 8, subsection C, highlighted in neon orange. I placed the letter and the contract side by side in the plastic sleeve. It was a visual representation of cause and effect. You did this letter, therefore this happens. Contract. As I assembled the binders, I practiced what I was going to say. I caught my reflection in the dark window of my apartment. I looked tired, yes, but I looked different. The softness around my eyes was gone. The hesitation in my posture had vanished. I rehearsed the opening line in the shower. I rehearsed it while making coffee. I had to be careful. If I sounded angry, they would dismiss me as emotional. If I sounded hurt, they would try to comfort me to shut me up. I needed to sound like a coroner reading a report. I needed to sound like a judge passing a sentence that had already been decided. I am not here to argue, I said to the empty kitchen. I am here to correct the record. No, too formal. You think I abandoned you, I tried again. But I have the numbers. No, too defensive. I settled on something simpler. I would let the binders do the talking. I would be the narrator, not the protagonist. The money was the protagonist. Sunday arrived with a sky the color of slate. It was cold, the kind of damp chill that seeps into your bones. I dressed with the same meticulous care I had applied to the binders. I chose a charcoal gray blazer, a white silk blouse, not the one I had packed away, but a new one, crisp and stiff, and dark trousers. I wore my hair pulled back in a tight, low bun. No loose strands, no chaos. I drove to the Oakwood Grill. It was a strategic choice. The Oakwood was a diner on the old highway, a place with vinyl booths that had been patched with duct tape and a smell of frying bacon that had permeated the drywall since 1985. We used to come here when I was a child, back before my parents started pretending they were upper middle class, back when we were genuinely struggling, before I became the solution to that struggle. This place represented the reality of who we were before the lake house, before the country club memberships, before the lies. I arrived at 11:30. I wanted to be there first. I wanted to control the terrain. I walked in. The bell on the door jingled a cheerful sound that felt at odds with the knot in my stomach. The waitress, a woman named Barb, who looked like she had seen everything and was impressed by none of it, nodded at me. "Table for one," she asked. "Table for 5, I said. "But I need a specific booth, the large one in the back corner, and I have a colleague joining me who will be sitting separately." I pointed to a small two-top table adjacent to the large booth. It was close enough to hear a conversation if voices were raised, but far enough away to offer a semblance of privacy. "Sure thing, honey," Barb said. I sat down in the booth. The vinyl was cold. I placed my bag on the seat beside me. 5 minutes later, the door opened, and Mr. Henderson walked in. He looked wildly out of place in the Oakwood Grill. He was wearing a cashmere overcoat and a suit that probably cost more than the diner's monthly revenue. He carried a leather briefcase. He did not look around with disdain. He looked around with the observant, predatory gaze of a lawyer scanning a crime scene. He saw me. He gave a microscopic nod. He did not come to my table. He walked to the small two-top I had designated. He sat down, facing my booth, so he could see anyone who approached me. He ordered a black coffee. He placed his briefcase on the chair next to him, unlatched it, and left the lid slightly open. I knew what was inside. The original wet ink copy of the Lake House Agreement. His presence was a physical weight off my shoulders. He was my nuclear deterrent. If Linda started to scream, if Marcus tried to intimidate me, if Gordon tried to gaslight me, I didn't have to panic. I just had to look at Mr. Henderson. He was the witness. He was the proof that this was not a family squabble. It was a legal proceeding disguised as lunch. I checked my watch. 11:55. I reached into my tote bag. I pulled out the 3 black binders. I placed them on the table. I aligned them perfectly with the edge of the formica. The black covers gleamed under the fluorescent lights. They looked like monoliths. Binder 1, for Mom and Dad. Binder 2, for Marcus and Eli. Binder 3, for me. I placed a glass of water next to my binder. I clasped my hands on top of the table. I did not check my phone. I did not fidget. I sat with my back straight, my feet flat on the floor. I looked at the empty seats across from me. In my mind, I could already see them. I could see Linda's face, tight with righteous indignation, ready to play the victim. I could see Gordon's averted eyes, the cowardice etched into his wrinkles. I could see Marcus's arrogance, the way he would try to lean back and look bored to mask his fear. I could see Eli's petulance, the look of a child who had been told no for the first time. For 17 years, I had sat at tables like this and begged for scraps of their affection. I had paid the bill and hoped they would love me for it. I had swallowed my pride and let them rewrite history because I was afraid of losing them. But as I looked at the 3 black binders, I realized something profound. I was not afraid of losing them anymore. I had already lost them. I lost them the day they decided my value was calculated in dollars. Today was not about saving the relationship. Today was about setting the record straight. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of grease and old coffee, but to me, it smelled like clarity. The bell above the door jingled. I did not turn my head. I kept my eyes on the binders. I heard the familiar cadence of their footsteps, the heavy, confident click of my mother's heels, the shuffling gait of my father, the scuff of boots. I waited. I was not the daughter waiting to be forgiven. I was the CEO of Alice Ross, Inc., and I was about to deliver the final annual report to a board of directors that had embezzled everything I had. They were here. Alice. It was Linda's voice. It was sharp, laced with a mixture of relief and annoyance. I looked up. They were standing there, huddled together like a flock of confused birds. They looked at me. Then, they looked at the lawyer sitting quietly at the next table. And finally, their eyes landed on the 3 black binders sitting between us. "Sit down," I said. It was not a request. The bell above the door jangled, a cheerful sound that felt entirely inappropriate for the execution squad that had just walked in. They approached the booth in a formation I recognized from a lifetime of family gatherings, Linda in the lead. The prow of the ship, cutting through the air with a sense of entitlement that was almost physical. Gordon followed in her wake, his shoulders slightly hunched, his eyes scanning the floor tiles. Then came Marcus, looking annoyed, checking his watch as if he had a board meeting to attend rather than a reckoning, and finally, Eli, hands jammed deep into the pockets of his parka, radiating the sullen energy of a teenager who had been dragged to church. They saw me. They saw the empty booth. They saw Mr. Henderson sitting at the adjacent table, sipping his coffee and reading a newspaper. Linda paused for a fraction of a second when she saw the lawyer. Her eyes narrowed. She recognized the suit, the briefcase, the air of professional detachment. But she recovered quickly. She was Linda Ross, and she did not let staff, which is how she viewed anyone providing a service, intimidate her. She slid into the booth opposite me. Gordon sat next to her. The boys took the outer edges, trapping their parents in the middle. There were no greetings, no, "How are you?" Linda placed her handbag on the table, a designer bag I knew cost $300, because I had paid the credit card bill it was charged to. She looked at me with a face that was tight, composed, and utterly devoid of warmth. "This has gone far enough, Alice," she said. Her voice was low, clipped. It was the voice she used when I was a child and had embarrassed her in the supermarket. "You have made your point. We are all very cold, and we are all very inconvenienced. Turn everything back on, and we can forget this ever happened." She spoke as if I had merely thrown a tantrum, as if I had held my breath until I turned blue and now it was time to breathe again. She expected me to nod, to apologize, to pick up the check for lunch, and to reactivate the autopay before dessert arrived. I did not say a word. I reached out and placed my hand on the first black binder, the one labeled Linda and Gordon. I slid it across the Formica table. It made a heavy hissing sound as it moved. Then I slid the second binder toward Marcus and Eli. Finally, I opened my own copy. "What is this?" Marcus asked, staring at the black plastic cover as if it might explode. "Open it," I said. "Page 1, Linda sighed, an exaggerated exhalation of pure martyrdom. "Alice, I do not have time for games. I have a house that is freezing because of your little stunt." "Page 1, I repeated. My voice was not loud, but it had the density of lead. Reluctantly. Gordon reached out and flipped the cover open. Marcus did the same. The first page was simple. It was a summary sheet. At the top, in large, bold font, was the heading, "Total Financial Contributions Alice Ross to Ross Family, 2008-2025. Underneath it was a single number. I watched their eyes. I watched Gordon's eyes widen behind his bifocals. I watched Marcus's jaw go slack. I watched Linda stare at the paper, her face freezing into a mask of confusion. $142,678.42, I read aloud. The number hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of the booth. "That is the principal," I continued, my voice steady. "That does not include inflation adjustments. That does not include the cash I gave you for groceries. That does not include the interest I paid on the loans I took out to cover your debts. That is the hard, cold cash that moved from my bank account to yours." "This," Gordon stammered. He looked up at me, his face pale. "This cannot be right. 140,000, Alice. That is a house." "It is a house," I agreed. "It is the house you are living in. It is the roof over your head. It is the heat you are missing right now." "You are exaggerating," Linda snapped, though her hand was trembling as she reached for her water glass. "You are twisting things. We help each other. That is what families do." "Turn to page 12, I said. Gordon turned the pages. His hands were shaking now. He stopped at page 12. It was a copy of the hospital billing statement from 5 years ago. "You told everyone the insurance covered your heart surgery," I said. "You told the church it was a miracle. Look at the bottom line." Gordon, he stared at the document. He read the line where the insurance company had stamped "denied," out of network. He read the line below it where a credit card payment had been applied for the full balance, paid by A. Ross. $18,000, I said. I paid it the morning before your surgery so they wouldn't cancel the procedure. I am still paying $45 a month in interest on the portion I couldn't pay off immediately. Gordon looked at me. For the first time in my life, I saw the veil of denial rip away from his face. He looked at the document, then at his wife, then back at me. "Alice," he whispered. The sound was broken. You paid this?" your mother said. She said the hospital worked out a payment plan. I was the payment plan. "Dad," I said, across the table. Marcus was flipping through his binder. He was not looking at the totals. He was looking at the section labeled Business Loans. "Wait a minute," Marcus said. His voice was sharp. He pointed to a bank transfer record. "This transfer, for the startup capital for SwiftPath, $5,000. "Yes," I said. "Mom said this came from their retirement account," Marcus said, looking at Linda. "She said they were cashing out a bond to believe in me." "They didn't have a bond." "Marcus," I said. "They haven't had a bond since 1998. That money came from my savings account. I transferred it to them, and they wrote you the check so they could look like the heroes." Marcus turned to Linda. His face was flushing a deep, angry red. "You told me you were investing in me. You let me give a speech at Thanksgiving thanking you for your faith in my vision. And it was Alice's money." Linda stiffened. "It does not matter whose account it came from. It came from the family. We are one unit. It matters to me." Marcus slammed the binder shut. "I have been treating Alice like she was cheap because she wouldn't invest more, and meanwhile, she was the only one investing at all." "And the loan payments," I added, looking at Marcus. "The ones you forgot about. I have been paying $55 a month for 2 years so your credit score wouldn't collapse. Page 22. Marcus opened the binder again. He stared at the auto-pay records. He looked sick. Then Eli spoke up. He had been slouching in the corner, reading the pages with a sneer. "So what?" Eli said. He tossed the binder onto the table. It slid into the ketchup dispenser. "So you kept receipts. Congratulations. Alice, you are an accountant. Do you want a gold star?" "Eli," Gordon warned, but his voice was weak. "No, seriously," Eli continued, his voice rising. "This is sick. Who does this? Who keeps a record of every dollar they spend on their own flesh and blood, just so they can throw it in their faces 10 years later? You are acting like we are customers. You are acting like this is a transaction." "It was a transaction, Eli," I said calmly. "It was a transaction where I provided the goods and services, and you provided the contempt." "You are trying to shame us," Eli spat. "You are sitting there in your fancy suit, with your lawyer over there." He gestured aggressively at Mr. Henderson, who did not even blink. "Trying to make us look like losers. You are throwing the past in our faces because you are bitter." "I am not bitter," I said. "I am broke, or I would be, if I kept supporting you." "We provided you a home," Linda interrupted. Finding her footing again, she leaned forward, her eyes flashing. "We raised you. We fed you. We put clothes on your back. Do I have to present you with a bill for your childhood? Alice, is that what you want? Should I charge you for the breast milk for the diapers?" It was such a classic Linda defense, absurd, hyperbolic, and designed to shut down logic with guilt. "The difference, Mother," I said, "is that parents are supposed to provide for their children. Children are not supposed to be the retirement plan, the emergency fund, and the insurance policy for 3 capable adults." I looked around the table. "You call this a family," I said, "but look at the numbers. This isn't a family. It is a parasitic organism. I have paid for your heat. I have paid for your health. I have paid for your mistakes. I have paid for the very roof that you kicked me out from under." "We did not kick you out," Gordon mumbled, looking at his hands. "You told me to leave," I said. "You told me to stop relying on the family. Well, here is what relying on the family looks like. It looks like $142,000. "Money isn't everything," Eli muttered. "You have no heart." "My heart is fine, Eli," I said. It is just no longer connected to my wallet. Linda took a deep breath. She smoothed the napkin on her lap. She looked at me with a gaze that was almost pitying. Fine, she said. You have made your point. You have shown us your little spreadsheets. You feel underappreciated. We hear you. Alice, we validate you. She used the therapy words she had learned from daytime television. Now, she continued, put those binders away, close the laptop, turn the power back on at the lake house. We will talk about a payment plan. Maybe $50 a month. We can work this out. We just need to get back to normal. I looked at her. She still didn't get it. She thought this was a negotiation. She thought she could offer me $50 a month on a debt of $140,000, and I would be so grateful for the crumb of acknowledgement that I would turn the faucet back on. There is no going back to normal, I said. Don't be dramatic, Linda said. We are family. We forgive each other. I am not asking for forgiveness, I said, and I am not asking for $50 a month. I reached for the third binder, my binder. I flipped to the very back, to tab 5. You want to go back to how things were, I said. You want access to the lake house. You want the status quo. The lake house belongs to all of us, Linda said. It is our sanctuary. Is it? I asked. I pulled out the single sheet of paper I had been saving. It was the photocopy of the letter from Miller Associates. I placed it on the table, right on top of the financial summary. 3 days ago, I said, I received this letter from a man named Gregory Miller. He says he represents you. Linda went pale. She had clearly hoped that letter would be a private intimidation, something I would sign in fear and silence. She did not expect it to be on the table at the Oakwood Grill. Gordon looked at the letter. What is this? I hired a lawyer, Linda admitted, her voice tight. To fix the deed, to make sure everything was fair. Fair, I repeated. I looked at Mr. Henderson. He set his coffee cup down. He picked up his briefcase and stood up. The family watched as the stranger in the expensive suit walked over to our booth. He did not smile. He did not introduce himself. He simply opened his briefcase and pulled out the original, yellowed document with the wet ink signatures. He placed it on the table next to the letter. My name is James Henderson, he said. His voice was a rich baritone that commanded immediate silence. I am Alice's attorney. I was also the attorney who drafted this agreement 10 years ago. He looked at Linda. Mrs. Ross, he said. Do you recognize your signature? Linda stared at the document. She nodded mutely. Then you should have read paragraph 8, Mr. Henderson said. I leaned forward. This was the moment. This was the pivot point where the lever of power shifted forever. You tried to sue me for the house. Mom, I said softly. You sent a legal demand to strip me of my ownership. You wanted to make it legal. I just wanted to protect the family asset, Linda cried. And in doing so, I said, you triggered the trap. I tapped the highlighted clause on the copy in front of me. The contract states that if you attempt to remove me from the title, or if you challenge my ownership, you automatically forfeit your right to occupy the property. Your license to use the lake house is revoked. Immediately, without further notice, the silence that followed was different from the silence before. Before, it was the silence of shock. Now, it was the silence of doom. What does that mean? Gordon asked, his voice trembling. It means, I said, looking him in the eye, that the lake house is mine, 100%. You are not owners. You are not guests. You are trespassers. You can't do that, Eli said, but his voice lacked conviction. It's Mom and Dad's house. Not anymore, Mr. Henderson said. Legally, the moment that letter was sent, the transfer of authority was absolute. We have already filed the declaratory judgment this morning. I watched Linda. I watched the realization wash over her. She had reached for the one thing she didn't pay for, thinking she could bully me into giving it up, and in the process, she had lost it completely. You set me up, she whispered. Her eyes were full of venom. I didn't set you up, I said. I protected myself, 10 years ago, against exactly this moment. I stood up. I buttoned my blazer. The locks on the lake house are being changed as we speak, I said. My property manager will be in touch regarding a time for you to collect your personal belongings. You will be supervised. Alice, please, Gordon said. He was crying now. Actual tears. Please don't do this. Where will we go in the summer? What will we tell people? Tell them the truth, I said. Tell them you spent 17 years spending your daughter's money, and when the bill came due, you couldn't pay. I looked at the table, covered in the evidence of my stolen youth. I am leaving these binders with you, I said. Study them, because if you ever try to contact me again to ask for money, or to tell lies about me to the family, or to claim I abandoned you, I will mail a copy of this to every single person in your church directory. I will mail it to your neighbors. I will mail it to the IRS. I looked at Linda one last time. She was small. She was defeated. She was just an old woman in a booth at a diner, staring at a bill she could never afford. Enjoy lunch, I said. I believe this is the first time in 20 years I haven't paid for it. I turned and walked away. Mr. Henderson followed me. I did not look back. I did not need to. I could hear the silence behind me, and it was the most beautiful sound in the world. You called it a formality. Mother, I said, my voice cutting through the thick, greasy air of the diner. You stood in your kitchen 10 years ago, drinking Chardonnay, and you told me that the contract was just a piece of paper to make the bank happy. You told me not to worry my pretty little head about the fine print. I tapped the document Mr. Henderson had placed on the table. Well, I worried about it, I continued, and because I worried about it, I understood what it meant. Paragraph 8 is not a formality, it is a trigger mechanism. It states, in plain English, that if the secondary parties, that is you and Dad, ever take formal legal action to alter my ownership interest or contest my title, the agreement is voided. Linda laughed. It was a brittle, nervous sound, like glass breaking under a boot. She waved her hand dismissively at Mr. Henderson, as if he were a waiter bringing the wrong order. Oh, stop it, Alice, she said, her smile twitching at the corners. This is ridiculous. It is just legal jargon. We are not suing you. We are just adjusting the paperwork. Mr. Miller explained it to us. It is a simple correction of the title to reflect reality. We are the parents. It is our house. The law understands that. She looked at Mr. Henderson, expecting him to nod, expecting the universal law of mother knows best to override the statutes of the state. Mr. Henderson did not nod. He looked down at her with the dispassionate gaze of a man who had seen 1,000 Lindas and crushed them all in court. Mrs. Ross, he said, his voice deep and resonant. The law understands contracts. You hired an attorney. You instructed that attorney to send a demand letter. That letter is, by definition, an attempt to contest the title. You have not just adjusted paperwork, you have initiated a hostile action against the primary owner. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. I filed the notice of breach with the county clerk at 9 o'clock this morning. Mr. Henderson said, It is done. The reversion clause has been activated. From a legal standpoint, your life estate, your right to use the property, to sleep there, to park your car there has been terminated. You do not have a claim to the house anymore. You do not even have a key. Linda's smile vanished. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like a curtain falling. She looked at the document, then at me, her eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying comprehension. You filed it, she whispered. I did, I said. You wanted to play law, Mom. You wanted to bring lawyers into our family relationship, so I brought mine, and mine is better. Next to her, Gordon slumped against the vinyl booth. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. This was the man who spent every Saturday morning at the golf club, leaning on his putter, bragging to his friends about his lake house, his sanctuary, his legacy. I knew exactly how he phrased it. He talked about it as if he were a landed gentry, a patriarch providing for his clan. Now, he was realizing that the only reason he had that story was because I had allowed him to tell it. "Alice," Gordon said, his voice a dry husk. "My clubs are up there, my fishing gear, the boat." "The boat I pay the slip fee for?" I asked. "The gear stored in the garage I pay to heat." He flinched. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw the shame. Not the shame of losing money, but the shame of a man who realizes he failed his one job. He was supposed to protect his daughter. Instead, he had let his wife consume her, and now, because he had been too weak to stop the feeding frenzy at holiday lunch, he had lost the only thing that gave him pride. "It is gone, Gordon," I said. "The narrative is over." Marcus sat in stunned silence. He was looking at his mother with a mixture of horror and fury. He was realizing that he had been a pawn. Linda had used his financial instability as a weapon to guilt me, and she had used his potential inheritance as a carrot to keep him loyal. Now, the carrot was gone. The inheritance had just been legally repossessed by the sister he had ignored for 2 decades. "You blew it," Marcus muttered to Linda. "You actually blew it. You tried to steal it from her, and you lost it for all of us." "I did it for you," Linda hissed, turning on him. "I wanted to make sure you and Eli had security." "You wanted control," I corrected her. "There is a difference." Eli, who had been vibrating with suppressed rage, finally exploded. He slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "You cannot do this," he shouted. Heads turned in the diner. Barb, the waitress, paused with a coffee pot in her hand, watching us. Eli did not care. "You cannot just steal the family house. Alice, it is unethical. It is immoral. You are evicting your own parents who does that." "I am not evicting them," I said calmly. "I am enforcing a contract they signed, and I am protecting my asset." "Asset." Eli spat the word out like a curse. "It is a home. It is where we spend Christmas. You are ruining everything because you are obsessed with money. You are cold. Alice, you are ice cold." I looked at my baby brother. I looked at the man whose legal bills I had paid, whose car insurance I had covered, whose mistakes I had erased time and time again. "I am not doing anything to you, Eli," I said. My voice was steady, quiet, and sharp as a scalpel. "I am simply stopping what I have been doing for you." The sentence hung in the air. It was the simple, undeniable truth. "I am stopping," I repeated. "I am stopping the payments. I am stopping the bailouts. I am stopping the silence. The pain you are feeling right now isn't me attacking you. It is just the weight of your own life falling back onto your shoulders because I am no longer carrying it." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a single silver key. It was the master key to the lake house, the one I had kept on my ring for 10 years, the one I used to check on the furnace when they were too busy to go up there. I placed it on the table. It made a metallic clack against the formica. Next to it, I placed a single sheet of paper. It was a formal notice, drafted by Mr. Henderson. "This is a 60-day notice," I said. "I am generous, even now. You have 60 days to remove your personal effects from the property. You will coordinate with the property management company listed on this sheet. You will not go up there alone. You will not stay overnight." "And after 60 days?" Gordon asked, staring at the key as if it were a religious artifact he had lost. "After 60 days, I will decide whether to sell the property or lease it out." I said, "If I decide to keep it as a rental, you are welcome to apply, but you will sign a lease, you will pay a security deposit, and you will pay market rate rent, due on the 1st of every month, just like every other adult in the world." Linda stared at the paper. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She was watching her entire world structure collapse. She was watching the hierarchy invert. The servant had become the landlord. I had one last thing to do. I opened my wallet. It was a simple leather wallet, organized and tidy. I pulled out a single dollar bill. It was crisp. George Washington looked out at the diner with his stoic expression. I smoothed the bill out and placed it in the center of the table. right on top of the black binder filled with the evidence of the $142,000 I had given them. "At lunch," I said, "you told me to stop relying on the family. You implied that I was the burden, that I was the one taking more than I gave." I pointed to the dollar. "If I ever relied on you for anything, for a ride to the airport that I paid for gas for a meal that I bought the groceries for a kind word that was actually a manipulation, then let us say this covers it." I looked at them. $1, I said. "Against 142,000, we are even. The debt is paid. I don't owe you anything. Not money, not loyalty, not silence." I stood up. My legs felt strong. The shaking inside my chest had stopped completely. I felt a profound sense of clarity, like the air after a thunderstorm. I picked up my coat. I folded it over my arm. "Alice, wait," Linda cried out. Her voice cracked. It wasn't the voice of the matriarch anymore. It was the voice of a desperate woman. She reached out a hand, her manicured fingers grasping at the air near my sleeve. "We are your family. You cannot just walk away. We are blood." I looked at her hand. I did not take it. "Family is something you do, Linda," I said. "It is an action. It is showing up. It is protecting. It is not something you demand while handing me the bill." I looked at Gordon. "Goodbye, Dad." I looked at my brothers. "Good luck, boys. You are going to need it." I turned around. "Mr." Henderson stood up, buttoning his cashmere coat. He gave a curt nod to the table, a professional dismissal, and fell in step beside me. I walked toward the door. I could hear them behind me. I could hear the murmur of their confusion, the rising tone of Linda's panic, the sound of Eli swearing under his breath. But the sounds were fading. They were becoming background noise, like the clatter of dishes or the hum of the refrigerator. They were no longer the soundtrack of my life. I pushed the door open. The bell jingled one last time, a bright, final note. The cold air hit my face, bracing and clean. The wind was blowing across the parking lot, stripping the dead leaves from the trees, clearing the way for winter. I took a deep breath. It tasted like frost and gasoline and absolute, terrifying freedom. I walked to my car. I did not look back at the window of the diner. I did not need to see them huddled over the binders, counting the cost of their arrogance. I knew exactly what they looked like. They looked like people who had finally been forced to pay their own tab. I unlocked my car. I tossed my bag onto the passenger seat. I sat in the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine roared to life. I checked my mirrors. The road behind me was empty. The road ahead was wide open. I put the car in gear and drove away. I did not cry. I did not smile. I just drove, leaving the debt, the guilt, and the Ross family in the rearview mirror, shrinking smaller and smaller until they were nothing but a speck of dust in the distance. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey to get to that table, but I'm glad I finally walked away. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment below and tell me your city or country, and let me know if you have ever had to set a hard boundary with your own family. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share these stories of strength with even more people. Stay strong, and remember, never let anyone hand you the bill for your own life.